Hey y'all, welcome back. Amber here. So I want to talk a little bit. My last video, I talked a little bit about the NAR settlement and just was kind of a hot take on all the things that are going on in the real estate market. And so if you are specifically, this is more so if you're a buyer. If you're a buyer and you're like, okay, now how do I do this now? How do I purchase a home? Like if I can't afford to have someone represent me, if I can't afford an agent, what does that mean? And how can I go about this home sale process? So I wanted just to pop it in and talk a little bit about that. And the other reason I want to talk about that is because I'm already seeing some very interesting things where people are writing offers on like a blank piece of paper and saying, purchase price to be this, the closing date to be around this date, the all other conditions per usual. Folks, that is not an offer. And here's the deal. The real estate contract is written by attorneys. It's kind of how we got into this mess. Written by attorneys. There are tons of clauses in that contract. For Texas, it's 11-page long, single space, 12-point font. And I'm actually, because it's a public contract, you can go on track and review it. I'm going to include it in the description, so take a look at it. If you're planning to go it alone, you should at bare minimum read it, because there are a number of clauses in there that could get you in trouble if you don't perform. What I mean is perform is if there's a specific date that you need to do something by, like maybe it's remove a contingency or have loan approval, whatever it might be, that if that date passes, you could be in default. And if you're in default, the seller has the opportunity to say, well, the buyer has breached the contract, and therefore I'm canceling the contract, and I'm going to take their earnest money deposit as my liquidated damages. So basically, liquidated damages are the money that a seller gets for the damages they have incurred by taking their property off the market and working with you as the buyer. So the however time that they lost with marketing the property because they were in a contract with you, that's typically what's called liquidated damages, which could be your whole deposit. Right. So this isn't these things are not small things. You don't write it on a postage note or go to Staples and put together a contract. That's not going to cut it. And even if it did, for most listing agents I know, that wouldn't be acceptable for any of my listings. It needs to be on that contract, just because you need to be very clear on what the buyer's responsibilities are and what the seller's responsibilities are. And those Staples contract or whatever, other contracts folks are thinking about using, it leaves a lot of ambiguity. And that's the one thing you do not want in a real estate contract is ambiguity and not sure who's supposed to perform that. This is how misunderstandings happen. This is how you wind up in court. And so trying to help for those folks that feel like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a try on my own and try to represent myself. Like I said, take a look at the contract. So chances are great if you don't write it that way. If you're going to be working with a listing agent directly, they will write your offer on that contract. So it's good for you to know. You, of course, will tell them, here's what I'm offering, and look over the contract. But before you get started, I think it's a really good idea to just familiarize yourself with it. So that way if you do decide to do that, you know what you're obligating yourself to. So that way you don't put your finances in jeopardy if things don't go according to plan. I have to say, in most of the real estate transactions I have been in, there's always something that does not go according to plan. And this is the thing, I'm going to start rambling a second, but I've been thinking about this for a minute. And I think what happened is there's so much vitriol is what's happening about real estate agents who's like, feel like a criminal. I'm like almost embarrassed to tell people that I'm a real estate agent. The way that the media and the way that, some of the things I'm seeing in forums and stuff, oh, they're crooks, they don't do anything. And I'm like, where did they get that from? Because the folks that I know work the behinds off to help folks buy and sell real estate deal with tons of, like, I can't even tell you, kind of crazy problems that they have to navigate and all the emotions. It's buying, especially residential. Not so much maybe in commercial, it's more about the numbers, but in residential, it's highly emotional. So dealing with an emotional buyer, an emotional seller, and trying to make sure that those two sides come together, it's no small deal. And so I was thinking of like, why are people like, oh, they don't do anything. You just like, you're just a number taker. And the reason why I think people think like that is no shade to any of the real estate shows. I was on HGTV, no shade, right? It was a great experience for me. The HGTV House Hunters. But the thing is, you got this 30-minute show, and it's like, okay, Mr. Sally and John moved to Texas, and they're looking for their first home. So you see Realtor Sarah show them 3 properties, and then they make an offer. That offer gets accepted, and then 10 seconds later, Sally and John are in their beautiful home, and their Realtor Sarah comes over, is congratulating them, and that's the end of the episode. And it makes it look like it's just so easy. Like, chances are great. Realtor Sarah probably showed Sally and John 45 homes, like over the course of several months, right? And so, as a real estate agent, rightly so, you don't get paid until your client gets what they need, right? You get what you want when your client gets what they want. So, all the driving around, all the calling the other agent to find out what's going on with the property, all the let's make sure your loan approval is ready to go. So, when you're ready to make up all that stuff that's behind the scenes, we don't showcase that. What you see as a general public is you see someone in fancy clothes and a fancy car driving around, having lunch, hanging out with their friends, walking through beautiful properties. And then like, for example, what is the show? Selling Sunset, or yeah, Selling Sunset is one, $1 Million Listing is another one. Like, if they're following, great shows. Again, no shade. But the issue is they make it look like it took them 2 seconds to put that deal together. And now they're off to, the Hamptons or wherever to celebrate the fact that they made $100,000 on one transaction. And the reality is, it is not that simple. Like I said, I've been in real estate 20 years total, well, a little over. Um, and as a licensed person, I will tell you the majority of my real estate transactions have all come with issues. Like, a friend of mine, I would be venting to her and telling her, you can't believe what happened. Oh my God, this happened. Oh, the seller did this. Oh, this happened with the house. And she's like, is that normal? She's like, maybe you should specialize in difficult real estate transactions because it seems like you have a lot of them. I was like, oh no, it's not just me. That is the industry, but we don't show you that. And the reason why we don't show you that is because that's our job. Like, our part of our job is to make sure that you have a seamless experience. So all the craziness that's happening behind the scenes, a lot of times as a buyer or as a seller, unless it's material and you have to make a decision on it, we try to kind of hide that from you because we know that the buying and the selling of a home is already highly emotional and can be very difficult at times. And so we are our role as your agent is to prevent some of that from hitting you, right? But I think what we've done in doing that in part is that we've created this environment where it looks like we do very little. And then all of a sudden, you're at the closing table and you get your house, and it looked like you pushed a few papers around and that was it. Totally not the case. And so, as I'm starting to see some buyers that are submitting offers on, I don't know, some kind of paper or contract that they got, it lets me know that people really do not understand how complicated a real estate transaction could be. Even if everything goes according to plan, there's always there's always an opportunity for something to not quite go right at any point in time. I'm not saying at the beginning, and you can get to the closing table and have an issue. And so that is the job of the buyer's agent. That's the job of the seller, to kind of work together to make sure that the buyer and the seller could get what they want, which is the seller gets their home sold and gets the proceeds from that sale and moves on. And the buyer gets to purchase that home that they fall in love with. At the end of the day, those are the results that we're looking for. But again, they don't always happen. And so some of the issues that can come up is, and so again, this is more around trying to help buyers navigate, if they choose not to work with an agent, help them navigate some of the issues that could come up. So one of the things that could come up is, you could run into an issue whereby You during your option period, and the option period is basically your opportunity to take a look at the house and get your inspections and things like that. Make sure that you're okay with the condition of the house. In the state of Texas, we are an as-is property state, which means that the property, as it sounds, as is. So typically what a buyer's agent would do is they would recommend that you get a home inspection. And that home inspection, and that inspector is going to come out to the property, and they're going to go up and down, check all the systems within the home, and see, and then provide you with sometimes a 30-page report on all the things that are going on with the house. Now, that's designed for you to know, because it's as is, that's designed for you to know what the condition of the home is. So you know what you should prepare for when it comes to any repairs that you might need to make to the house. The other thing that that report does is it allows you, if there's anything, what I would usually recommend, anything that's specific, like health and safety issues. So if there's mold in the property, you may go back to the seller and ask them to remediate that. Anything that makes it where the property, it's actually a safety concern. If there's an electrical, maybe it's an older home and there's an electrical issue, you may want to go back to the seller and ask, like, hey, can you remedy this? And so the seller has options, of course. So the seller could say, nope, I'm not going to remedy this. It is as is, and I meant it, and I'm not doing repairs. So at that point, while you're in your option period, you can say, all right, well, I'm not willing to take the property this way. So I'm going to go ahead and not rescind my offer. I'm going to go ahead and back out. And when you do that, all you lose at that point is just the option fee that you pay. So sometimes that's maybe $250, $500, depending on what you decided to put down. But you're not going to lose your earnest money. That is protected while you're in the option period. The other thing that could come up, if you're a buyer that you need to have closing costs paid by the seller, oftentimes the way that looks is that maybe the home, for example, is $200,000, and you're going to need, let's say, let's call it 800,000. Let's call it about 8,000-ish for closing costs and title fee, all that good stuff. And so you make an offer and you just put that on top, right? Because you want to make a full price offer. So you tell Mr. Seller, I'm going to offer you 208 for this property. And the seller says, you know what? That works for me. I get my price. I'm happy to give you the credit because you're giving me more than I asked. And then you get your closing costs paid. We're all good. Well, not yet, because the appraisal has to approve you at the 208. And so if the money is not, or if the value is not there, where the appraiser cannot justify a 208 sales price, you're going to have to go back to the negotiating table, right? So it means you have to go back to the seller and say, oh man, they're not going to allow me to put the whole 8,000 on top. Can you still work with me? And it's going to be between the two of you to work that out. So I say this to say that don't assume that once you have like you've negotiated a deal at the front end and you've signed the contract, don't assume that there's not going to be any more negotiation as you go through the rest of the transaction. It's, to me, a lot of people, like, they celebrate when they open escrow. It's like, nah, you celebrate when you get to the closing table, because there's a lot of things that need to happen between the time that you open escrow and the time that you get to that closing table. And so a couple of things that I wanted, just another few things that I wanted to share around that is, if you're going to go it alone as a buyer, then first thing is really understand kind of what the market conditions are. And you can do that by looking, I would say you can start with looking a few things in Zillow and just kind of see, based on the area that you're looking in, how many properties are for sale in the area. If you have a lot of inventory, that will let you know you have a little bit more, you may have a little bit more negotiation room to be able to negotiate the price of your property. The other thing is, if you're seeing a lot of, if you drive through the neighborhood and you're seeing maybe a lot of signs and things like that, or coming soon, that type of thing, that lets you know that it could be a little bit more opportunity for additional properties to view, in which case that might give you more negotiating room. So that's a good thing to know. The other thing that you absolutely must do before, like, you can do the just drive around, kind of look on Zillow just to kind of get an idea of what's out in the market. But my recommendation is, do not start driving around and really, like, looking seriously at property when you're ready to do that, you absolutely must talk to a lender. And the reason why is what you don't want to happen is you don't want to fall in love with a property and then realize that the monthly mortgage payment is going to be on where your budget's going to be comfortable. And so rather than doing that, it's better, like that's the unsexy part, right, of home ownership. It's fun to go out and look at homes and check out how they've decorated it, look at the different neighborhoods and the amenities. All that stuff is fun. What's not fun is, okay, I need 2 years of W-2s, your pay stubs. We're going to pull your FICO scores and look at your credit report, how long you've been at your job. All that stuff is very unsexy and very not fun, but very necessary. Because again, you need to, one, if you are serious about purchasing a home, you're going to absolutely have to have that pre-approval letter to submit an offer. So they're not going to take your word for it. I'm good for the money. They're going to want to see that you took the time to go talk to a lender, understand all your numbers, get comfortable with your numbers, and then go ahead and submit that offer. And so when you get serious about looking for a home, you must absolutely get a pre-approval. And so you're noticing the term that I'm using is pre-approval, not pre-qualification. There's a difference. Pre-qualification basically says you call the lender and you said, okay, yeah, this is how much I make. This is roughly what my debt is. It's basically a very light view of you telling them what your financial situation is. And then based on what you've told them, they're going to come up with, okay, you qualify for X amount at approximately this interest rate as it is today, with X amount down. That's a very weak approval or weak look at your finances. What most agents, what listing agents, or what sellers are going to be looking for is a pre-approval. So a pre-approval means you've done those things. You've talked to the lender. You've told them this is how much I make. This is they pulled the credit, so they know the FICO scores, all that stuff. But they've also verified that information. So you've sent them all the documents to make sure that all the information, all the financial information that you have provided has been verified by a lender. And the lender has then looked at that information and said, okay, yes, based on this information that we have, provided nothing changes, we will make this loan, and these are the terms, because you're also going to need that information to put into your offer. So highly suggest the pre-approval, not the pre-qualification. Pre-qualification would be good if you're just kind of dipping your toe in, kind of getting an idea and you want to know, but I would never go out into the market and look at homes and think that pre-qualification letter is going to be enough for someone to take your offer seriously. So that's another thing to concern yourself with. I talked about the property inspection. I'm just looking over to see my note. Talked about the property inspection. Again, understand that at least here in Texas, properties are sold as is. And so you can absolutely request repairs, but just be prepared for the seller to come back and say, no, I'm not doing that, because Texas is an as is state. And at that time, you can decide, okay, this is too much for me. I think I'm going to go ahead and bounce. Recognize as well that the job of an inspector is to tell you all the things. So some things are not, it's not like foundation issues, cracks in the foundations, cracks in the walls that indicate that there's something major where it's going to be a significant issue from a repair perspective. Those things you want to pay close attention to. But if it's just like, okay, there's some cosmetic issues, things like that, anticipate that the seller may not fix it. They're going to say, especially if it's a resale house, they're going to say, you're going to come in here and make it your own anyway. So chances are great they may not be open to those types of repairs. The other thing they can do, they can say, no, it's as is. You can decide to walk away if you choose, or they can say, you know what, I'm not going to make any repairs. We're out of here. However, I will give you, based on what you're asking for, okay, maybe there's a little hair on the carpet. That room might need new carpet. Maybe there is an upgrade on, let's say, even something that's a little bit more significant, like, oh, okay, we need to replace the tankless water here, something like that, where it may be a little pricier. I'll give you a credit of $5,000. So that way you go do your thing yourself. So that's another thing that could happen. So just know that that's that negotiation after you have your inspection, that negotiation may happen. And then, like I said, the other thing that I mentioned, when the next time another negotiation might be necessary, is when the appraisal report comes back. Sometimes we're holding our breath, especially if you've offered over because you do need the closing costs and you're trying to get those taken care of from the seller. Um, that if it does not appraise, expect that you will have to renegotiate the purchase price of the home. So just know that that's part of the process, and depending on what's going on in the area, it may be a significant disparity between what you offered and what the property appraised at, or it could be something really light where it's a little bit easier to negotiate. It will absolutely depend on the area. And then when it comes to the property appraisal, just know that there's nobody that can influence the appraiser. They're typically going to look at what was the last property sold, and what they're trying to do is get what is like for like, what is the property that most recently sold that's most like the property in question, the property you're preparing to purchase. And so with that, they're going to look at a sold property, they're going to look at active property, they're going to look at property that's pending. But in terms of how they weigh it, the weight of those, they're not always equal. So active property is just the competition; those properties have not sold yet. So a property could be way higher than what that's active, that's currently being offered at the same time the property you're preparing to purchase is on. The weight of that is not, from an appraiser standpoint, is not as high because the property has not sold. And so they'll look at it, but in terms of how they're weighing things, where they're putting more of the weight is going to be on the sold property, the most recent sold, as well as what's pending. Because recent sold lets us know this is what was going on in the market. Let's say, because typically, houses take about 30, depending on where you are. Let's call it 40 days to sell, and you got another 30-day escrow, 30 to 45-day escrow. So now you're talking about, let's call it 60 days. So the sold lets us know, here's what the market conditions were. This is what the market was bearing approximately 30 to 60 days ago. Let's call it that. The pending is what's actually happening now, right? So because those properties just went into contract. So that's what we use as realtors. We use the pending to kind of really get a sense of, okay, this is what the market is bearing currently, real time. But an appraiser is going to put more weight on what's actually sold. Again, they consider all of them. They consider sold, they consider pendings, and they do look a little bit at the active. But the thing that's going to have the most weight is the sold. So just know that as you're making an offer, and especially if you're going to be asking for over the asking price or asking for seller concessions around closing costs and things like that, just know property has to appraise. The other thing is, again, I'm going to put at least the purchase agreement for Texas in the description. Like I said, highly recommend taking a look at it. It's fascinating reading. No, not really. But it's still, if you're going to go it alone, it's still worth doing. Just get familiar with it. So at bare minimum, if you're going to go to the listing agent to write up your offer, then you can speak intelligently about, here's how I want it put together, right? The listing agent will likely have tons of questions for you as well. So if you've already taken a look at the contract, you already kind of know, okay, these are the questions that they may ask, or these are the decisions that we need to make according to how we would like this offer to be presented. So really take some time to take a look at that contract. I know it's not a fun read, but we're talking about thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it's one of those where I recommend, even though it's boring, go ahead and read every single line, because you don't want to be caught off guard and not understand something or misunderstand something and then be out financially just because of a misunderstanding. That's how lawsuits happen. That's how mediations happen. An ideal state is you don't want any of that. So, and then the last thing I'll talk about, just the closing, just what to prepare for, because you're going to get a closing statement on what you need to bring. That's usually going to come from your lender, but the closing statement on what you need to bring to the closing table in order to close. So either how much money you need to wire, or what do you call it? Drawing blank. Cashier's check. Is that the right term? I don't know if it's cashier's check. But anyway, certified check from your bank saying these funds are good. That you'll need, I don't know why I'm not bringing part of that, but that you'll need to bring to the closing table in order to close. The other thing, speaking of closing, the other thing is that's one of the areas that you can negotiate as well, is when the closing takes place. So if the seller's living in the property, they may need a couple of days to actually leave, from the time that escrow closes to go ahead and move. So they may say, hey, we need 3 days before we're going to vacate the property. Or it could be like, hey, the property's empty. So as soon as you close, as soon as it's funded, you can go ahead and move. So that's another thing to just pay special attention to. When can you take possession of the property? Is it at funding and closing, or is the seller going to need a few extra days to vacate the property before you can actually get your key? So anyway, those are just some additional information for, I know this is a very strange time. We're in this kind of hybrid situation, and even we as real estate professionals, we don't have all the updated contracts and how the disclosures are going to work. I anticipate there's going to be a ton more disclosures. If you've ever seen a closed file, you'll know that a closed real estate file, there's probably about 50, 60 pieces of paper and contracts stuff all in there. So maybe more, depending on what kind of sale it is. And so my goal here is just to hopefully educate you a little bit about, it's not, let me go to Staples and write up a purchase agreement or put it on something I found on LegalZoom. And based on what state you're in, there are going to be some rules that govern your state a little bit differently. So you're going to want to educate yourself. So like I said, I hope that track form that I'm going to include in the description for this video is helpful. And then if you have questions, you want to reach out and you need some advice, again, this is what we're here for as real estate professionals. We've been given a pretty bad rap with all this going on, but our goal is to help people into home ownership. That's what we do. And so like I said earlier, we get what we would like in the form of compensation when you get what you want. And so it is in our best interest to make sure that you get what you need and that you walk away happy, because again, for us, for you, it's a one-time purchase. For us, at least in my case, I view you as a lifetime client. So when the next time a friend or a family member is ready to purchase something, that you feel that you are well taken care of, to where you would actually come back or recommend they come back to me. And so for that reason, this is a lifetime thing. It's not just a transaction thing. So anyway, hopefully this information has been helpful. I know there's so much stuff floating around. And again, we're all kind of wondering ourselves how this is all going to shake out. But what I will tell you, the best thing that you can do for yourself right now is just educate yourself. So watch videos like this. I'm sure there are tons of other folks that are putting together content on what to prepare for and how to think through the home purchase experience. If you're going to not be navigating this with somebody that's professional and has done this before, there's just some things that it's incumbent on us as a profession to make sure that we educate. So with that, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions for me. Comment, let me know where you're watching this from. If you're in Texas, I'm also licensed in California. So if you have questions about that, they're very different. Buyers are much more, I would say, the difference between the two that I notice is in Texas, it feels like as a buyer, you can kind of, if things don't go according to plan, you can kind of get out of the contract for a number of different reasons. Whereas in California, not so. You get so far into the transaction, and it's real hard for you to back out of the contract at that point, in which case that means your earnest money is in jeopardy. So anyway, if there's any other information that would be helpful to you to explain as we navigate this new season, this new version of what it is to purchase a home in the US, please let me know. I'd love to see your comments. I'm happy to make content around that. That would be valuable and be helpful for you. So with that, I think that's it for this video, and I will see you in the next one.